For whatever reason, it seems the deeper down you go, the stranger animals become. And this is even more true when looking specifically at oceans, with some of the creatures down there being alien enough to inspire movies, including animated ones like Nemo, which, if you have watched, will surely recognize this monstrosity. This is an anglerfish, and unbeknownst to most, it can be found nearly worldwide. And unfortunately for those with thalassophobia, there's not just one species roaming about, but rather more than 200 species, as any fish belonging to the order Lophiformes is considered an anglerfish. This group is characterized by generally nightmarish appearances, and more importantly, luminescent fin rays that they can turn on and off and use to lure unsuspecting fish to their doom. To achieve such a wondrous biological feat, it turns out that these anglerfish essentially bond with bacteria floating in the murky depths. Research has found that they even take this partnership one step further. As like Venom in Spider-Man, anglerfish and its bacteria have a symbiotic relationship, whereby each relies on the other, which has resulted in the bacteria literally changing genetics to better fit the needs of the anglerfish, with some studies finding that anglerfish-bound bacteria have genomes 50% smaller than those seen in their free-floating cousins. And such a bizarre adaptation is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to anglerfish weirdness, as they possess an array of features rarely seen elsewhere. For starters, anglerfish found on the seafloor tend to have odd body proportions, being extremely round in width but very thin in height, making them a kind of biological pancake, while those found closer to the surface are flattened sideways, being tall yet narrow. Other oddities include skin so fragile it can be peeled by hand, depressed teeth that allow fish to guide unknowingly straight into their stomachs, and the ability to swallow prey twice the size of their entire bodies, thanks to flexible bones and stomachs that can be safely distended to grotesque proportions. However, hold on to your seats, because the strangest part of the anglerfish has nothing to do with any of these facts, but instead in the way which they reproduce. Fortunately for your sanity, not all anglerfish have disturbing mating practices, but some, like the deep-sea anglerfish, are bound to fuel your nightmares, as they utilize parasites to make babies. You're probably wondering how on earth do parasites even fit into this equation? And the answer is kind of confusing, as the parasites are, drumroll please, the male anglerfish.
Wow!
Yes, male anglerfish can be parasites. And to not confuse anyone on this whole process, it's best to start at the very beginning, with the deep-sea anglerfish's habitat. These guys live in the murky depths of the Atlantic and Antarctic Oceans, sometimes being found as deep as 4,400 meters, or 14,436 feet, equivalent to 47 statues of liberties stacked on top of one another. At this depth, the pressure is equivalent to 430 atmospheres, meaning that if you were to suddenly experience this amount of pressure, you'd instantly implode. So to say the least, the anglerfish inhabits a brutal environment, which results in their numbers being few and far between, with various locations typically only having a couple anglerfish, making the possibility of finding a mate near impossible. To compensate, male anglerfish have quote-unquote invested their adaptation points into becoming expert lady trackers. They have highly developed large eyes and sensitive olfactory organs that help them detect scents and light within the water. This has allowed them to solve the problem of finding females in such an inhospitable environment. However, as a trade-off for these potent organs, the male anglerfish have become in many ways useless and incredibly vulnerable, being smaller than their female counterparts and not just a bit smaller, but in some scenarios over 500,000 times smaller by weight. If this was applied to humans, then girls would on average weigh more than 3 times the Eiffel Tower. And along with extreme sexual dimorphism, males also suffer from ineffective, underdeveloped jaws that make catching prey impossible. Meanwhile, their gonads are further unmatured, meaning they never fully grow and are basically doomed from the get-go, unless that is, they can find a female. Because they, on the other hand, are far from defenseless, and have the resources and tools the male lacks. So how does a male anglerfish benefit from this quote-unquote beacon of light? Well, once it finds a female, it literally fuses its body to her, essentially forcing the two to become one. This odd method starts with the male biting and latching on to a larger female, where it then releases a special enzyme that melts the female's skin down to the blood vessel level, allowing the two to completely connect. This results in the male being able to receive nutrients from the female's hunting efforts, in return for him providing sperm, and thus preventing his demise and ensuring that he matures. What's also crazy is that multiple males can be attached to just one female, with some species having up to 8 males bonded per female. So on the bright side, they'll always have good company. However, it's not all fun and games for the males, since as he spends more time as a parasite relying on his Princess Charming, he slowly atrophies and disintegrates, with unused body parts like eyes, fins, and even some internal organs being the first to go. In the end, he is reduced to essentially being just one giant testicle, doing nothing else than providing the female with sperm when she is ready to mate. Now that you know how anglerfish reproduce, it's time to go outside and touch some grass. If you found this episode interesting, you'll probably enjoy our episode on the freshwater snail, which as it turns out is the 3rd deadliest animal in the entire world. Not something you were expecting from the French's favorite meal, were you? And like always, thanks for watching, and until next time on Living Zoo.